Good evening. Oh, Good evening. I am Andrew Osei, MassDEP engineer out of the Southeast Regional Office. And we are holding an official public hearing under the Massachusetts General Laws C-30A. I am the hearing officer for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded and conducted remotely in a Zoom webinar format. The recording will be posted on MassDEP's website. Some Spanish, Portuguese, and Cape Verdean interpretive services will be available from DEP staff and a hired interpreter if needed for those who wish to provide verbal comments. MassDEP is not able to provide interpretation of all comments over the course of the night. The interpreters will now introduce themselves and ask if any interpretation services will be needed, starting first with Maria Pinell.
Good evening. I'm Maria Pinell, Director of the Division of Municipal Services at MassDEP, but today I will be provided services of interpretation in Spanish. I will translate these instructions. Buenas noches, yo soy María Pinó con el Departamento de Protección Ambiental de Massachusetts y ahora yo voy a proveer interpretación en español de las instrucciones que escuchamos. Buenas noches, soy Andrew Osei del Departamento de Protección Ambiental de Massachusetts, también conocido como MassDEP. Hoy celebramos una audiencia pública conforme a las leyes generales de Massachusetts en el capítulo 30A. Soy el oficial de audiencia esta noche. Esta audiencia se está grabando y está realizándose de manera remota en un formato de seminario web de Zoom. La grabación se publicará en el sitio web de Massachusetts. Algunos servicios de interpretación en español, portugués y caboverdiano están disponibles por parte del personal de MassDEP y también un intérprete contratado si es necesario para aquellos que deseen proporcionar comentarios verbales. MassDEP no puede proporcionar interpretación de todos los comentarios durante el transcurso de la noche. Los intérpretes ahora se presentarán y preguntarán si se necesita servicios de interpretación. Si hay alguien presente que necesite asistencia interpretativa en español, por favor levante su mano virtual ahora usando esa función en su pantalla.
All right, we'll give a second for someone to raise their hand if they need interpretive services in Spanish.
I see a couple of hands raised, actually one. Alguien ha indicado que necesitará asistencia. Después que el oficial de audiencia complete su presentación, proporcionaré la presentación en español. Jamie?
Boa noite, meu nome é Jaime Gonçalves, sou analista ambiente do Departamento de Proteção Ambiental de Massachusetts, também conhecido como MassDEP, e estamos realizando uma audiência pública oficial sobre as leis gerais de Massachusetts, C.30A. Esta audiência está sendo gravada e conduzida remotamente em formato Zoom webinar e a gravação será publicada no site do MassDEP. Alguns serviços de interpretação em espanhol, português e cabo-verdianos estarão disponíveis pela equipe da DEP e de um intérprete contratado, sem necessário para aqueles que desejam oferecer comentários verbais. Mas DEP não fornecerá interpretação de todos os comentários ao longo desta audiência. Se alguém precisa desculpa, se alguma precisar de assistência como tradução desta audiência pública, por favor, levanta a mão no ícone do Zoom.
And we'll give a second for anyone to raise their hand. I see we have a hand that was raised previously, and that hand still is up. All right, one hand has been raised that may need interpretive service for Portuguese. Oh, it's my understanding that this person may not need interpretive service and may be raising their hand to comment. So we'll proceed to Cape Verdean. Zenilda?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anilda, and I will be your Cape Verdean interpreter for the evening. Alô, sim, boa noite. Muito obrigada pela sua presença naquela reunião dele. Meu nome é Anilda, também proporciona interpretação de cabo-verdiano durante a reunião. Então, nota dá boas-vindas a todo alguém que está ali. Portanto, que ele sim, MassDEP está fazendo aquela reunião conhecida para ela também, e está ali para fazer uma sessão de pergunta pública que lhe está bem ser gravado e está ser conduzido como um formato híbrido, e que lhe significa que a pessoa pode participar, levanta a mão se quer fazer algum comentário. Que a gravação está ser postada no website de MassDEP, algum serviço de tradução está ser prestado durante a reunião para espanhol, para português, para cabo-verdiano, e também tem serviços de tradução está ser disponível para funcionários de DEP e outros assistentes, se necessário. Que as pessoas que estão a fazer assistência com interpretação está ser não introduzido, se quem está a introduzir a pessoa, de modo que os outros dois tradutores já fazem essa introdução, e nós podemos utilizar a função de levanta-mão caso nós mestre de que serviço ali. Então, se tem alguma pessoa que está na lista de participantes que está mestre de serviço de interpretação para cabo-verdiano, por favor, nos utiliza a função de levanta-mão, que para funcionários pode registrar-nos como alguém que quer fazer algum comentário durante a reunião. Por favor, nos levanta-mão se tem alguém na lista de participantes que gostava de fazer algum comentário durante a reunião. Obrigada.
So if you can only raise your hand if you need interpretive services at this time. Two hands have remained raised throughout the beginning of this hearing. Thank you.
So I do not see any hands raised at this time that needs interpretive services.
All right, and so we'll proceed. The purpose of this hearing is to accept public comments on MassDEP's draft proposed amendments to the Title V regulations at 310 CMR 15 to establish natural resource nitrogen sensitive areas and a new watershed permitting regulations at 314 CMR 21. To minimize background noise and interference, the host has muted all remote participants and turned off the chat function. We will hear first from elected and appointed officials who should raise their virtual hands now if they wish to comment. You will be unmuted in the order you raised your hands and then asked to state your name and affiliation. If you are speaking on behalf of a group or organization, and provide your comments. If you are using a cell phone, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to toggle mute or unmute. Commenters will be limited to 3 minutes. MassDEP will not be responding to your comments because this is a public hearing. We are only here to listen and record the comments. MassDEP also encourages you to submit comments by email to dep.talks@mass.gov. Please include Title V and Watershed permit in this subject line. The public comment period closes at 5 p.m. on January 30th, 2023. I will now open the hearing for oral comments. If there are elected or appointed officials here who wish to provide comments, lost my screen. I apologize, lost my screen for a second here. My apologies for that. If there are elected or appointed officials here to wish to provide comments, please raise your virtual hand now if you have not done so already. All right. And we will be taking names in the order that they show up in my participants window here. So starting with Aaron Souza with Kathy Fox Alfano on deck. Please follow the prompts to unmute yourself, and if you have the ability to show a camera, please do so, and don't forget to lower your hand when you come on.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I was just wondering, so first I'm kind of hearing about it, apologies it's late. What's the net result for residents in Dartmouth who have private septic systems, non-public sewer?
Aaron, just to clarify, this is a public comment session, and so we'll be taking all comments, but we cannot respond to questions.
Okay. All right, I'll wait to hear some more comments then. Thank you.
So if we can restart the time with the next speaker. And MJ Mastrangelo will be on deck. And when you come on, please state your name and affiliation. If you have a camera, please turn it on. And don't forget to lower your hand once you go through the prompts of unmuting yourself. It looks like Kathy has dropped off, so we'll move on to MJ with Meredith Harris on deck. So MJ, if you can follow the prompts to unmute yourself.
Hi everyone, when it's your turn to speak, you'll see a prompt asking you to join as a panelist. If you could click yes on that prompt and then unmute, that would be great. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Mary Jane Mastrangelo, I'm a member of the board of the select board and the member of the sewer commissioners. We have submitted written comments, and these comments are in addition to what the Board of Selectmen has submitted. I do think it's important for the regulations to allow prioritization of septic systems close to closer to water bodies, and to make that differentiation. I also want to say that without a watershed permit, I think the Board of Health, who is the septic system authority in the local towns, needs to have authority to determine which septic systems should replace first, and that there should be an incremental replacement of septic systems over 20 years, if that's what the plan is going to be, determined by the local authority. And so instead of requiring 75% reduction in nitrogen over 20 years, think about 18.75% every 5 years over 20 years. And I think there needs to be some look at practicality and how this is going to be implemented. And I think the input of the local authority is really important for the implementation of the change. So that's really my comment in addition to what we've already written as comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to Meredith Harris with Gary Markowitz on deck. Meredith, please follow the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation before you start your comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Meredith Harris, and I am an over 50-year resident of Mashpee. I'm a member of the Mashpee Sewer Commission, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. And I'm primarily speaking because I would like to go on record in support in principle of the proposed watershed permit regulations as stated to provide a 20-year permit for communities to implement long-term wastewater planning in the most efficient and effective way for the entire watershed. Permittees will be authorized to take holistic, long-term, innovative approach to reduce nitrogen load that enters the estuaries and the abatements. Who could not agree with this? The regulations and the proposed amendments are difficult to sift through. Much education is needed to help people understand that this is a good thing. These changes are good. They need to be modified and they should be addressed so that it's realistic, but I urge you to move forward and to move quickly. Help us to find funding to get the work done. And I believe that all of the towns can work together as they need to. As I interpret this, the regulations would help to reduce nitrogen and fragile degrading of polluted waterways. And it authorizes towns, not support, not encourage, but authorizes towns that share common waterways to work together to clean them up. I believe that the proposed regulation should be confined to Cape Cod, not to the South Shore of Massachusetts and not to Massachusetts as a whole. I believe that the time frame for 20 years with periodic reviews is great. We've far too long been letting the waters degrade, and are we going to wait until we have a possibility of skull and crossbones posted in front of all of our waterways because we're no longer able to use them? As we've seen over the years, the town has developed, all of the towns have developed, first with small cottages and cesspools and some pipes going directly from houses directly into waterways. That was stopped or slowed down to some extent, but it still exists. But this Title V regulations was a start to that. I believe that these regulations will be a good factor in trying to help to reduce and to change the nitrogen going into our groundwater. We know that our polluted waters are occurring for many different reasons. And this is a way to get started for us to address the issues before we can no longer use our waterways. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll be hearing from Gary Markowitz with William Fredericks on deck. Gary, please follow the prompts, and when you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation before commenting.
Okay, I guess you can hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. My name's Gary Markowitz. I'm the founder of Save Our Shoestring Bay. Thanks for the opportunity to make comments on this updated set of regulations governing wastewater management systems. In 1996, the MassDEP issued its regulations on Title V. It was about 27 years ago. So for the record, there's been plenty of time for everyone to know that there are existing regulations and that they were potentially flawed by dodging the identification of what and where nitrogen sensitive areas are and where they exist. With the DEP's guidance, thousands of Title V septic systems were approved with no regard for their impacts on NSAs. Despite the MassDEP's intent, Title V septic technology was used as a de facto wastewater management system when sewering or infrastructure wasn't present. Fast forward to 2023, and the MassDEP is finally proposing sensible draft regulations for the 1996 regulations that were made that repair the omissions and loopholes of the original Title V regulation with regard to their application to NSAs. The new regulation clearly defines what and where NSAs exist, and we applaud the MassDEP on this essential step. Many Title V systems installed since 1996 are in close proximity to the newly defined NSAs, including ours, would be deemed illegal under the new regulations, as well as under the old version of Title V regulations with the identification of NSAs. You've heard that right. It's a fact that many of our systems could not be grandfathered under either the version of Title V regulations from 96 or the new regulations. We believe that the MassDEP fully comprehended the impending financial calamity that their rulemaking would investigate and develop their brand of reasonable remedy by including a mitigation period of 20 years under the watershed permit application process. The regulations offer municipalities up to 5 years to develop and submit watershed permits through the process. To be fair, it's not the fault of property owners that the solution being offered by MassDEP, no matter how many years, offers no way to pay, fix, or to complete the regulatory errors of the old system. We support the revised regulations, and remedial actions can no longer be subject to procrastination. We've already done that for 27 plus years. It's the state that caused this problem, and it must be the state that solves the financial and technical assistance disconnects that ensure that we achieve the goals of these regulations. We hope you'll take these comments to heart and finalize rulemaking and financing to backstop the regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Next, we'll be hearing from William Fredericks. William, when you get the opportunity, please follow the prompts. And don't forget to state your name and affiliation before you start your comments. Kathy Fox Alfano will be on deck.
Can you hear me okay? I don't see the clock starting.
Yes.
There we go. Okay. Bill Fredericks, live on Hollywoods Road in Mattapoisett, Massachusetts. I have a septic system. I also represent our homeowners association that has 7 septic systems within our local area. The local town of Mattapoisett advertised in the paper that this was going to be an informational meeting. So we've got no briefing or understanding just what is involved with this possible new regulations. I was hoping to join this to find out what this was all about. There's word around that this could cost homeowners tens of thousands of dollars to comply. There's no information of where this applies, various parts of town or other areas. I was hoping to get that information tonight. So I'm going to certainly talk to our town hall tomorrow to find out why we had so little information prior to this meeting. I understand this is just a comment period rather than informational. It was sold to us again as an information meeting rather than just a comment meeting. So the other question is, where is the supply? Are there maps available? I didn't see anything on the town website that shows where these applicable areas would be. And also, if this is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, possibly to homeowners, and this is a new regulation, I hope the state of Massachusetts will be covering the cost. People built their homes, should have some sort of ability to keep their homes and not have to have these huge costs involved with possibly complying with new regulations. So I expect the state of Massachusetts, this is something new, and that the permit holders for our septic systems will be grandfathered. I certainly like to see what the state of Massachusetts is going to do financially to cover the cost of this system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. And I invite you and anyone else to check out our website that will be placed in the Q&A, the links, where we have an abundance of information with respect to these proposed regulations in the framework. And maps are included. And so I invite you to check out the website to better inform yourself. So continuing with Kathy Fox Alfano with Maggie Division on deck. Kathy, once you get the opportunity, please follow the prompts and state your name and affiliation before commenting.
There you go. Hi, this is Kathy Fox Alfano. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I am the chair of the Bourne Wastewater Advisory Committee, although my comments are as an individual. First, I agree with people who have spoken before me that there cannot be an unfunded mandate. It is not fair to homeowners to bring this, to ask them to pay potentially thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, when we already put in systems that were, due to the regulations, what we thought were the right ones. Also, the watershed permits, it's one thing if a town has 1 or 2 watersheds, but in the case of Falmouth where there's 14, that's ridiculous. They need to re-examine how they go about these watersheds. Also, there are many towns with shared watersheds. We need understanding of how that's going to work. And lastly, they must include ponds as well. In Mashpee, I think every pond there has pollution. We need to include the ponds as well as the watersheds. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Now we'll hear from Maggie Division with David Ray on deck. Maggie, when you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation before commenting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Maggie Nivison, and I'm with CLF. The Cape is facing what in law and economics is called a tragedy of the commons. There was a time when farmers would graze their herds freely on common lands, and everyone would use the land as they needed to feed their herds, and no individual farmer had any more responsibility to care for the land than any other. The result was that the common land was overused, trampled, and stripped of the plants that made it useful. No one did anything wrong, really. It wasn't anybody's fault. Everybody used what they were free to use, but without any regulation, they used it up and everyone suffered. If one individual farmer spotted the problem and tried to do better by using the common land less, it wasn't enough to make a difference. The only way to make the land productive for everyone was to address the problem collectively. All of the farmers benefited when a system was put into place to protect the land and ensure that it stayed productive enough to be useful to everyone who needed it. On the Cape, no individual person has done anything wrong. People are just living their lives. But even though no one intended to do any harm, there are a lot of pollutants being put into the water. The environment cannot handle the strain. It is collapsing. If we do not accept a system of rules to govern this problem, we will all lose. These regulations are the right thing to do. They are the only thing that can be done. Thank you.
Just a friendly reminder that we're currently hearing from elected and appointed officials first, and then we'll move on to others. And so right now we're here from David Ray with Ann Miller on deck. David, when you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a Mass resident that has a home on Cape Cod and plan to retire there. I am strongly opposed to the DEP proposed regulations since it focuses on homeowners. This will be a huge financial burden to individual residents. Also, DEP is picking and choosing which areas are targeted immediately, and then over time add other areas to their list arbitrarily over the years. Most likely, everyone in the state will be affected at some point or another. I believe the regulation should not focus on individuals in the communities. The regulation should be focused on requiring towns and cities to have a holistic plan to resolve the nitrogen issues as well as other clean water issues. These proposed regulations are written to fail in many ways, such as there would be issues with septic system upgrades when a lot of properties, especially near the water, do not have the land to upgrade to this type of system, period. Most likely, it would be impossible for homeowners to upgrade the system within 5 years time frame due to the conditions such as lack of vendors, equipment shortages, financial burdens, etc. It will be interesting to know what will happen if homeowners cannot meet the requirement. If a town is still working on the watershed intent but hasn't fulfilled the requirements, is there an explanation on when the 5-year clock on homeowners will start? Because of this 5-year time frame and a proposed mandate to upgrade their septic system, homeowners will be taken advantage of by vendors and contractors by raising the cost of installing systems. I do not see anything in the proposal regulations regarding these issues. I think it is important for DEP and the state to inform their citizens and property owners how much these systems will cost, currently up to $40,000, and that there is an annual maintenance fee in every year between $1,000 and $3,000, and that the state has not approved many of these systems, and that even the few that are online are not very efficient. DEP recognizes that the best way to reduce nitrogen is a bigger plan with the towns to have a holistic approach, such as sewer treatment plants, etc. So homeowners should not be part of this regulation. If there's a concern about nitrogen pollution, then the plan should address industrial, commercial, and farming nitrogen polluters. From my understanding, these entities have a much higher nitrogen load than homes. Part of a plan, DEP and state should prioritize which properties need to be converted first. Properties including farms, commercial, multi-units, and closest proximity around a watershed area will have a greater impact on reducing the nitrogen levels. Then a study should be done after these properties are converted to determine impact and if it makes sense to continue to convert additional properties. Also, I feel the proposed regulation.
I apologize, Mr. Ware, your time has completed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your cooperation. Now we'll be hearing from Richard Holmes. And again, I just would like to reiterate kindly, we're first hearing from elected and appointed officials. Afterwards, we'll hear from all others. We'll make sure to do our best to get to everyone this evening, but we're starting with elected and appointed officials. So, Mr. Holmes, when you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation before you comment. Mr. Holmes?
Hey, Mr. Holmes, you should see a prompt asking you to join as a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Rich Holmes. I'm not an elected official. I'm just a resident of Sandwich. So quickly, a couple points. The cost of upgrading septic systems in areas where it's not feasible to put sewers, will likely increase the cost of housing on the Cape, which is very unaffordable right now for many people. Just don't want that aspect, consider the state to consider that in these regs and how to mitigate that. Because homeowners will obviously pass on the cost when they sell their homes. I'm also concerned whether there will be enough vendors, and I assume trained by the state or should be trained by the state, who will know how to install and maintain these systems. And just also that the cost should be shared, at least in part, by the state, because the waterfronts are, something that everyone on the state and beyond enjoys and derives benefit from, economic and otherwise. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I'll ask if anyone that currently has their hand raised that is not an elected or appointed official, if you can lower your hand for the meantime, and then we'll get to you when we've completed with the elected and appointed officials. So it appears that all of the elected and appointed officials have spoken. Now that all the elected and appointed officials who wish to comment have done so, individuals who indicated they needed interpretive assistance and wish to comment should raise their hands now. I believe Hilda, you had your hand raised in need of interpretive assistance. And so as you were the only one, Hilda, I'll give you the floor to comment. Please state your name before starting your comment and follow the prompts once they're available.
I'm sorry, we do not need any assistance in language translations.
Oh, okay.
We would like to speak, but we don't need any translations.
All right. Victoria, if you can restart the clock. Hilda, I'll let you keep the floor to state your comment. And then we'll have Harry Graff on deck. And so now at this point, we're hearing comments from all others that wish to comment. And so all others can raise their virtual hands now. And I'll be taking them in the order that they show up. Thank you for your cooperation. Hilda?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Earl Barnhart. I'm Hilda's husband. I'm going to speak for her. My name is Earl Barnhart. I live in East Falmouth. I represent the Green Center, a nonprofit research and educational organization. The DEP is called the Department of Environmental Protection, but in practice it operates with a tunnel vision, focusing only on nitrogen and particularly focusing on sewers and IA mini sewers, whose only function is to gas off some, but not all, nitrogen in water. These sewer and IA options waste all other environmentally related resources. They waste water, they waste energy, they waste all nutrients. The technology of sewers do not recover and recycle any nutrients. Nutrients are collected from one location, transported using enormous amounts of water, and disposed of in another location, some into the groundwater and the rest into sludge, which is trucked off Cape and incinerated. Sewers also use and waste enormous amounts of energy. The energy cost of the wastewater treatment facility in Falmouth is already the highest energy cost for the town, to sewer only a few estuaries. If Falmouth sewers all 14 of its estuaries, the energy cost will be many times what it is today. And perhaps most important, sewer construction and operation contributes very large amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, which are never considered or discussed or calculated in the comprehensive water management plans or the watershed permits. This is all a very poor way to provide environmental protection. Fortunately, there's a faster, cheaper, and more environmentally ecological solution to water pollution than sewers and IA systems. They use on-site, cheap, simple systems to keep all nutrients out of water in the first place. Urine diversion and composting toilets do not use water and remove 100% of human waste nitrogen from a house's wastewater. Urine diversion and composting toilets can recover and recycle all nutrients at a very low capital cost and a very low energy cost. We have researched and tested this technology over the past 14 years in Falmouth at a home scale where the nutrients are recycled on site. Such a system would cost a homeowner only $40.15 per year for electricity and not pay for 10,000 gallons of water and get free fertilizer. This solution is clearly the best available nitrogen reducing technology, which the DEP wants. It is more affordable and more sustainable than the currently proposed solutions. This infrastructure is now already being used in Brattleboro, Vermont to collect, store, process, transport, and recycle urine as a valuable fertilizer product for agriculture and food production. Each town on Cape Cod should do the same in their future watershed permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we hear from Harry Graff with Andrew Gottlieb on deck. Harry, once you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation if that applies, and follow the prompts to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Harry Graff. I represent an association of 79 homeowners in Dennis, Massachusetts. And I would like to make two comments. One, in Dennis, we seem to be having competitive solutions to the same problem. Dennis just approved phase 1 funding for a sewer system. And from what I can understand, this solution is now in competition with the proposed regulations. That's confusing to me and to my neighbors. I would like to see the department get a little more proactive in helping us understand how to navigate these two solutions. And secondly, with all respect to the technology, simply posting information on a website is not a sufficient communication process. We had the same problem with the sewer system here in Dennis, and the sewer committee, the wastewater committee, became very proactive in getting the word out to the citizens of the town using mailers and videos on the website. I would encourage the department to take a similar stance in getting information out to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we hear from Andrew Gottlieb, followed by Ann Miller. Andrew, when you get the opportunity, please state your name and affiliation and use the prompts to unmute yourself.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Gottlieb. I'm the Executive Director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. Speaking tonight on behalf of DEP's approval of DEP's proposed regulations to upgrade Title V and to create watershed management permit regulations. I want to commend DEP in moving forward with something that we collectively have known on the Cape for decades needed to be done. We've been experiencing declines in water quality since the 1980s. Over 50 reports done by UMass Dartmouth and the towns has documented the need for water quality improvement. It has documented that septic systems are the primary cause. The region has a region-wide area management plan since 2015 that was approved by Governor Baker, certified by the EPA, that identifies watershed management as the right approach to do cost-effective water quality improvement on Cape Cod. It relies on and identifies the need for targeted sewering supplemented by intelligent use of alternative approaches such as IA systems, but also PRBs, shellfish, and the like. The fact of the matter is that not enough towns have moved fast enough to implement these region-wide solutions to stem the pollution problems that we've seen. Over 90% of our estuaries fail to meet water quality standards, and we've known this for a long time. The idea that DEP has come out of nowhere to drop this on an unsuspecting public is just frankly ludicrous. The department has visited each of the towns in advance of releasing these regs, public hearing. People have had opportunities to comment and participate at the municipal level for years. These regs strike the appropriate balance. Let's be clear. The objective of these regulations is to encourage towns and to engage the public to then engage with and encourage their towns to do the right, most cost-effective and intelligent way to manage a nutrient load, which is to have watershed permits and publicly managed watershed solutions. And it is only if and when the towns fail their residents, perhaps yet again, to come up with a 20-year solution to solve these water quality problems, that the individual requirement to upgrade septic systems would go into place. There is, if their municipal officials react responsibly to the stimulus that you're providing, no potential likelihood that there will be a crush of septic system improvements, because the towns control what actually happens here, not DEP. And I commend you in coming up with a thoughtful way of doing this and urge you to adopt these regulations as quickly as you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gottlieb. Now we'll hear from Ann Miller, followed by Doug Wolf. Ann, when you get the opportunity, follow the prompts to unmute yourself. And before you start commenting, state your name and, if applicable, your affiliation.
My name is Ann Miller. I'm a homeowner in Eastham, Massachusetts. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to say that my husband and I have a small cottage in Eastham, not far from the bay. Of course, naturally, we would be concerned about the potential cost as senior citizens of additional regulations. I want to say, however, that I think it's long overdue and it's so important. I don't think we really can afford to put this off. We really should have done it a long time ago. We both like to swim, so we noticed that our beaches along the bay are sometimes closed in the summer, often at the height of the summer. I like to swim in the ponds also. The ponds are beautiful. However, after mid-August, it's not always safe to swim in them. I often will look at the Association to Preserve Cape Cod's website because they actually do testing for cyanobacteria so that I can tell whether it's safe. But the very fact that I have to do this, that it is often not safe, this is scary. I mean, cyanobacteria is very dangerous. You take your dog there, your dog could get sick and die. So, I just don't think we can put it off. I trust that our communities, the regulations allow the communities to come up with a plan, and I trust that they will. I think the people who are being alarmist about it are only thinking about the money, and I think that that will be resolved. And so I totally support these regulations.
Thank you, Ann. Now we'll hear from Doug Wolf, followed by Gail Rodriguez. Doug, when you get the opportunity, please follow the prompts to unmute yourself, and before commenting, state your name and, if applicable, your affiliation.
Hello, my name is Doug. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. My name is Doug. I'm a third generation vacationer on Cape Cod. My grandfather and grandmother started coming during World War II, and they saw how fragile and beautiful the area was at the tip of the Cape. Gas rationing prevented them from coming during World War II, and they resumed their 2-week vacations at the Whitman House, fishing in the AM and PM and seeing friends. I started coming in the 1960s and was taught at a very young age to respect and protect the environment. I conserve water, I conserve electricity, I conserve natural resources, so you can say I'm a conservative. As a youth, Outdoor activities were very important. I learned leave no trace and continue to teach leave no trace as an adult leader. My two sons, Logan and Lucas, are leave no trace followers and fourth generation vacationers to Cape Cod. They fish and enjoy beaching. I'm soon to bring my granddaughter Lydia to vacation on Cape Cod. She would be the fifth generation. My family, along with the other callers from yesterday and today, want to protect Cape Cod for future generations. We may have different paths to get there, but we have the same goals. Do we use a carrot or do we use a stick? Do we have financial burdens to the current generation, or do we create incentives like tax rebates, composting toilets, and things like that? There's been mention to a scientific method. In high school, we follow the scientific method. It's defined by Google as a method of procedures that has characterized natural science since the 17th century, consisting in systematic observation, measurement in environment and experiments, and the formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses. Criticism is the backbone of the scientific method, unquote. So when we are here told to follow the science, I follow Google's definitions and are open to criticisms and conclusions. I listen to both sides. My soil is not tested, so I'm not sure if I'm contributing to this problem or not. I'm here to help, just tell me how. In the 1960s, local corn was grown on Cape Cod and sold at Perry's Farm, and now it is being trucked in from off Cape. So is this better or worse? I appreciate your time and wish for a successful solution.
Thank you, Doug. Now we hear from Gail Rodriguez. Gail, when you get the opportunity, please follow the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation of APCO before starting to comment. On deck or following, we'll hear from Catherine Lang.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Gail Rodriguez. I'm from Westport, Mass. I'm also chair of the Westport Bike and Walking Committee. I just wanted to bring up a few points. And one is I was at the meeting at UMass Dartmouth. I encourage anybody on this call, go to the website, the Mass website. They post the recording so you can get some more information. I can hear a lot of people are not understanding, and the information there is pretty good. There was a lady who was a real estate agent. To hear her point of view is really interesting, and how it will affect home values. But just in a nutshell, my friend, it was a real estate in Rhode Island. I used to live in Rhode Island, and she said that they've already got rid of all the cesspools, and that was an effort through the state with some grants. So just for other people to understand too, there was just a bill introduced between Senator Montigny and Markey from Dartmouth. And that is a bill asking the state would pay costly septic upgrades. So their proposal is that would be, if it's mandated in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a watershed permit, that upgrade would have to be partially funded. That's how Rhode Island did it. So I think we can do that. We can get funding for this, certainly, and not put it on the residents. The last thing I want to say, we're part of the Westport Bike Committee in town here. Route 6 is having an upgrade, MassDEP. So we are extending sewer from Fall River. So I encourage all the other communities consider biking and walking safely, and also encourage tying into sewer, which that may help reduce the load of the nitrogen. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Andrew. And I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Catherine Lang, followed by Keith Barber. Catherine, when you get the opportunity, please follow the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation if applicable before speaking.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, and thanks for the time to speak tonight. My name is Catherine Lang. I'm the policy specialist for the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. We are a statewide nonprofit organization with 85 member groups dedicated to protecting and restoring the Commonwealth's rivers and streams. Many of our members are located in the area we're talking about tonight for these regulations. I've attended quite a few of these hearings so far because we are really concerned about the growing toxic algae problem on Cape Cod and in Buzzards Bay. And we would like to see the strongest possible regulatory plan to clean up the septic system pollution, the nitrogen pollution, and protect our coastal habitats and the communities and people who depend on those habitats and areas. We support the regulations that DEP has put forth because they encourage the burden of action to go to municipalities rather than to individual homeowners. We think it's a pretty elegant solution DEP has put forth. Having the municipality kind of plan and control how they will address the pollution puts more creative, multifaceted solutions at play rather than the individual homeowner upgrades. Control of the solution lying with the municipality, we think, is a better solution regardless. So we're glad that that's where these regulations point to and encourage. We commend DEP for finally stepping up and proposing action on this issue, but these regs can't be delayed any further than they already have been. We've seen decades of ecological harm that have clearly proven the need for some kind of action to curb nitrogen pollution in Buzzards Bay and on Cape Cod. If that's not enough, any more delay can cause even more ecological collapse. And we know that will bring in economic, cultural, and social implications as well that we can easily avoid by passing these regulations and cleaning up these waters. As many speakers have said, this pollution has gone on for more than 20 years. The cost of these upgrades are definitely going to be high. There's no doubt about that. But waiting any longer to pass regs and actually act on this problem will only increase that cost for current residents, municipalities, and future generations, as other folks have said. So we're looking forward to seeing a strong plan of action come from DEP with no further delay. Thanks for your time this evening and for all the information you've put forth.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we'll hear from Keith Barber, followed by Michael Dalio. Keith, when you get the opportunity, use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation, if applicable, before starting to comment.
Hello, this is Keith Barber. I'm from Pocasset, and I am part of the Pocasset Water Quality Coalition. I'm also a member of the Bourne Wastewater Advisory Committee. And as a citizen and as a Pocasset water quality person, we 100% support these regulations. I want to thank the DEP for providing so many opportunities for people to speak about it. My one point to make would be that we need more education. We've heard tonight how many people are unaware of all this happening. And I think people that are not part of either government or associations, haven't seen enough information about this. And I think DEP needs to get on board and encourage the towns also and municipalities to create more education opportunities. I want to mention that the watershed permits are definitely the way this should be going in each of the municipalities. This provides a 20-year time limit for the town to get itself organized inside that time frame and make sure we don't have the crazy rush of a 5-year mandate. I also want to remind people how important this is. If we go with a 20-year time limit and the regulations put into effect with that, that means this can be completed by 2043. I know I won't be around for 2043, but my kids and my grandkids will, and I want this to be a legacy that I was in favor of getting this done. I think another main point besides education is funding, financial aid, grants. And I do think also the DEP and the state government need to be at the forefront of that and include that as part of the education. People mentioned about sewering. Sewering costs about $100,000 per home, counting a treatment plant, counting the piping, counting hooking it up to the houses. Where an IA system, if you retrofit it, could be $20,000 or a new one would be $40,000. If funding is provided, that's definitely the way we should be going. And my final points would be that the cost of not doing this is much, much, much higher than doing it. This will be the legacy of our generation if we can get it done properly. And I think that's a very, very good way to leave Cape Cod better than we found it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Now we'll hear from Michael Dalio, followed by Allison Bowden. Michael, when you get the opportunity, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation, if applicable, before starting to comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Michael Dalio, and I am a resident of Dartmouth, Mass. I am retired and live on a fixed income like many others. I do not support or agree with either of the proposed regulation changes as they have been presented. The watershed permit places the responsibility to mitigate the excessive nitrogen on the towns, and the proposed Title V change is outright extortion of the towns to sign on to this radical watershed permit. If a town voluntarily obtains a watershed permit, it can possibly cost the residents as much or more than a proposed Title V septic upgrade. This is an obvious scheme to bypass the unfunded mandate requirements enacted as a result of Proposition 2.5. Did MassDEP utilize the Conservation Law Foundation in the drafting of these regulation changes? The state has direct control of 60% of the controllable nitrogen in the Westport River watershed where I live, and has done nothing to mitigate it. In fact, the opposite is true. They deregulated. With the soil conditions in Dartmouth and Westport, it is unlikely that the septic systems are contributing the levels of nitrogen depicted. There is no evidence that testing in the areas around septic systems has been done in these areas. You obviously are trying to transfer this issue to the towns, and then at the same time do not allow the towns to deal with the major contributors of nitrogen. Is it your intent to bankrupt the towns and or the residents? The town of Dartmouth was able to obtain the list of members of the NSA subcommittee only after filing a FOIA request. The director of that committee spoke tonight and did not identify his affiliation. There are other questions and document requests that have not been answered. What are you hiding? Distrust of government is very high right now. The proposed regulation changes and a process undertaken by DEP to hurriedly sneak these egregious changes through and hide documents is adding gasoline to the fire of distrust by the people. MassDEP's mission of being the stewards of a clean environment has morphed into an organization of backroom schemers and obstructionists to the truth, and has become an enemy of the people of the state. In conclusion, adoption of either of their regulations would wipe out hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of equity earned by a specific class of people in Massachusetts. The specific class is the homeowners with private septic systems. As such, This situation has all the makings of a very strong class action lawsuit, which I have no doubt will be pursued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalio. Now we'll hear from Allison Bowden, followed by Nicole Plant. Allison, once you get the opportunity, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation if applicable before starting to speak.
Good evening. Thank you for recognizing me. My name is Allison Bowden. I'm Director of Science and Strategy with the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts. I'll provide detailed written comments and just summarize a few points briefly here. First, I strongly support DEP's proposal to act on this issue. It is critical to take action as soon as possible. I served on the Environment Working Group of the Massachusetts Climate Assessment. That report, which was released in December, concluded that the most urgent threats to our environment are the impacts of warming combined with pollution of our fresh coastal and marine waters. We need coastal marshes and seagrass beds to store carbon, to help us mitigate climate change, to protect us from storms, to help us adapt to climate change, and also to provide habitat for fish and shellfish. That report also found that lost productivity of fisheries and aquaculture is among the most urgent threats to our economy. 80,000 people in Massachusetts, home of the nation's most valuable fishing port, New Bedford, make their living in seafood. Clean water is essential to our health, to our culture, and to our economy. And the problems that we see today will only get worse if we delay action. We can't afford not to act on this problem. Recognizing that funding is going to be critical to supporting implementation, including support for lower income property owners, is also critical. The Nature Conservancy has been working for several years on developing practical options, including, for one, development of a utility framework called a responsible management entity that would be useful to operationalize distributed treatment systems as a shared solution. The Conservancy granted $100,000 in private funds to the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center, which is part of Barnstable County last year. And EPA granted an additional $1.2 million a few months ago. So that work is underway. And we're also studying public and private funding models in other places and how they could be applied here in Massachusetts. For example, New York State has a grant fund available to homeowners for septic upgrades, in addition to the variety of loan options that exist. So new sewers are part of the solution, and we need a bigger toolbox. We need watershed approaches that include things like wetland and shellfish bed restoration, and we need these next generation septic systems. So we look forward to continued collaboration with DEP and others to develop truly workable solutions for clean water. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Next, we'll hear from Nicole Plant, followed by Chris Michelle. Nicole, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation before speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nicole Plant. I am an owner broker of a real estate company in southeastern Massachusetts. I have been a licensed realtor for over 22 years. I would like to state I oppose this regulation. Please note that you have asked me to be a gatekeeper of the Title V regulation since I joined and started being a realtor. This came into effect in 1995. You have given me loopholes to make sure that these laws go through. You make me state what I have to do for my job every day. DEP gave me guidelines and I have abided by them with a code of ethics every day. The problem with the Title V regulation is that most people stay in their homes in this area over 12 years. We do not allow people to have a trigger mechanism at any other point than a sale. The loopholes that you have given us are basically the only people that are held accountable are having mortgages. You are now asking us to put in septic systems for people who already have mortgages, trying to feed their families, and you're going to give these homes stigmas. I agree, we all want clean water. I want clean water every single day. But Title V was put in place for drinking water. It was not put in place to take care of the estuaries and everyone else. It's to protect the consumer. I work every day to protect the consumer. We are not protecting the consumers. We are hurting a lot of homes. In the town of Westport, Massachusetts, we have 7,000 septic systems. This is an unattainable goal to replace these septic systems. If the permit is lifted at any time to 5 years to replace these septic systems, it will not happen. I don't have time to finish all of my speech, and I do have a 14-page letter coming to the DEP, but we need common sense in this law. We need to teach people how to pump their septic systems. We need help to help them maintain their septic systems. We need them to tell how to test their drinking water and make sure that they know what they're drinking. We need to go back to the basics. I'm asking the DEP to punt. I am asking you to go back to the original regulations. Please protect our water systems. Please protect the consumer. But the things that you pass and have given me a passing Title V today on a passing septic system don't hurt the people who are buying a home today. And for 5 years from now, if you don't give them a permit, they have to replace a system with a $50,000 plus system because now they won't be able to do it. The banks won't give them loans. We'll be seeing short sales and foreclosures in certain areas due to the DEP trying to protect water. You're not protecting the consumer. There's a smarter way to do this. Please help the consumer. I get everybody wants to have cleaner water. There's a smarter way. Please pull this regulation.
Thanks, Nicole. Now we'll hear from Chris Michaud. Chris, please use the prompts to unmute yourself. And before starting to comment, state your name and affiliation before speaking. And then Michelle Kirby will be speaking afterwards.
Thank you, Andrew. Christopher B. Show, Town of Dartmouth. This is not due process. Towns were not part of the equation in contriving the strategy to address this problem that I haven't heard anyone disagree with yet. As was mentioned earlier by someone who had a lot of opportunity with his presence on the NSA subcommittee. On August 24th, 2022, MassDEP met with us at the Dartmouth Town Hall. They essentially gave us the 5-year in the watershed. The only thing different is that they told us at that time that the watershed would be an all or nothing approach, as someone mentioned earlier from Bourne about the shared watershed conundrum. Because if one town doesn't join, you got a problem. And how do you partially manage a watershed? You can't. You find yourself into a situation that these proposed regulations do not address. You'll be sued by the Conservation Law Foundation when the data that you're required to submit does not reveal compliance towards the 20-year goal. The watershed permit is a strategy for failure. It is not an elegant solution, as someone mentioned earlier, because it is not the town. The town is not some sort of inanimate object like the federal government that just prints money endlessly. The town are the people that live there. And who is going to pay for these sewer extensions? Who is going to pay for these best available nitrogen-reducing technologies? The people are. So with that being said, the MassDEP needs to change its mission statement because we were not involved in decisions that affect our lives. More importantly, we know that the timeline provided in the court documents on page 3 at the Barnstable County Superior Courthouse, recorded on May of 27th of 2022, it outlines all of the actions of DEP. And those actions include the letter from the commissioner on June 1st, the outreach on 8/24 to the town of Dartmouth, the promulgation of regulations by the end of the month. And what's really concerning is that this is all apparently a done deal and just a horse and a pony show by MassDEP so they can hurry up and pass these regulations. because the Solid Waste Committee on 10/27, one day before these regulations published, said, rather than trying to launch new draft regulations at the end of the outgoing administration, MassDEP under Commissioner Stuberg, I'm adding Commissioner Stuberg, decided it would make more sense to try to launch those at the beginning of a new administration. They're now posting for this job. This is not due process. This is just a wink and a nod to the CLF lawsuit, and this is an egregious behavior by a state agency, and it's a sidestepping of due process. Shame on you, DEP. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chris. Now we'll hear from Michelle Kirby, followed by Aaron Souza. Michelle, when you get the opportunity, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation, if applicable, before starting to speak.
There you go. Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, first of all, I would like to applaud the DEP. This has brought to light the local and global problem of water contamination. I'm Michelle Kirby and I'm from Rochester. The watershed permit is the way to go. We need a collective effort with all types of technology available. We need to increase awareness within these 20 years. Yes, it should be shorter, it should be expedited, but the shit has hit the fan and it's, we have to move. We're not leaving any legacy for anybody. We're not even leaving clean drinking water for everybody. Thank you for bringing this to light. And my husband, Andy, has something to say too.
I'm Andy Hammerman, and I also live in Rochester, Mass. We purchased our property in 2016, and because of Title V, put in a new septic system. We chose to put in a Presby system, which is, we thought, the most environmental system available at the time. Now it looks like we would have to change that system. So the financing of all this is a big problem. And I would say that definitely there has to be funding from outside. On another note, I have 20 years experience working with composting toilets. And I asked my engineer before we put in the Presby system for our septic field if we could do composting toilets. And he stressed that because of gray water, you would still have to have a very similar system to what is a traditional septic system in order to get it all permitted. And it was easier there meaning in Rochester, to put in a septic system that would take care of all of our waste. Composting toilets, dry composting toilets are another alternative that people are not used to. Again, I've built them and managed them for over 20 years, so I know how they work. They work really well, but they are a cultural shift. And putting feces and urine into clean water and then trying to get feces and urine out of clean water is one of the biggest mistakes for sewage treatment in the history of humans. Like, it needs to be composting toilets. So I would just stress to the DEP that needs to be looked at and find ways that users will adapt to them and like them because they're great. So thank you for the chance to comment.
And it's all the waterways. It's not just the estuaries and the bays, it's the rivers and the ponds that everything's in jeopardy right now. We got to move. Thank you. Please be expedient.
Thank you. Now we're here from Aaron Souza. Aaron is the last person that has a hand raised. So if you would like to comment, please raise your hand so you're placed into the queue. And Aaron, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation before starting to speak.
Hi, Aaron Souza, resident of Dartmouth. Fortunate enough to build a new house in 2010 with what I thought was a good septic system. Learning 10 years later that the towns and MassDEP think that the septic system needs to change. Repeat a lot of the things that I've heard on this call for people who believe that there needs to be much more education. This needs to be state and town funded and not always absorbed by the residents. I think everyone on the phone agrees that, clean water is something that's needed for now and the future. I don't think the approach to solving that is to always lay it on the resident. So look forward to more information.
Thank you, Aaron. I see some others have raised their hands, so we'll proceed. Sean McDonald, followed by Jane Voles. And also, I'd just like to say, if I've mispronounced anyone's name, like I have, I apologize and apologize ahead of time. And so we hear from Sean, followed by Jane. Sean, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation before speaking.
Good evening. My name is Sean McDonald. I'm with the town of Dartmouth, a member of the select board. But more importantly, I'm a homeowner and a citizen of the Commonwealth. I was not going to speak tonight, but what has been discussed previously occurred tonight. You had a member who spoke on behalf of whatever environmental affiliation that he was in, and he spoke in favor of the regulations, the proposed regulations. But what he failed to do, what he failed to divulge, what he failed to acknowledge was that he was a member of the NSA committee that developed these regulations. This has been a systematic problem since day one. We've had member upon member of this committee speak on behalf of these regulations, but fail to acknowledge that they're actually part of the regulations creators and this NSA committee. And to be honest with you, many of us who volunteer, who get elected, but still volunteer and don't get paid, try to do good government. And when something like this comes in, it's just basically a giant slap in the face to all of us and to everybody. And it needs to stop. We've had several environmental groups come in favor of this, and I would expect them to agree with these proposals. However, they're not going to pay for those proposals. They're not going to pay the retirees who have to pay for a septic system upgrade. They're not going to pay for a single parent or a young couple starting off. 2,000 homes in Dartmouth, 7,000 homes in Westport, and God knows how many others throughout the rest. And you know something, the Cape is the first in line, followed by the South Coast. What are the watersheds? There are 23 watersheds in the state of Massachusetts. The entire state is going to be affected. And it's time for the governor to step in and say, we need to hold and stop this process. I don't think any governor wants to start off an administration where it's going to cost her constituents hundreds of millions of dollars. And this has been a huge problem since day one with these proposals. At this point in time, I really have nothing more to say than other than I've lost trust in the DEP and I'm extremely disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Now we'll hear from Jane Vose, followed by Robin Delafuente. Jane, when you get the opportunity, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation if applicable before starting to speak.
Yeah. Oh, start. I'm sorry.
And we can hear you, Jane.
Okay, good evening. I live in Falmouth, Massachusetts. And I just want to reiterate that I think the urine diverting and composting toilets are going to be essential and the most forward thinking way to go. And they are the ultimate AI. And I encourage everybody to look up the Green Center in Falmouth and that Hilda and Earl presented. And they'll lead you to a lot of really great information. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Thank you, Jane. Robin is the last person that has a hand raised. If anyone would like to comment, please raise your hand so you can be entered into the queue. Robin, once the prompts come up for you, please use them so you can unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation before speaking. Robin?
Hi, Robin. Could you please unmute? Hey, Drew, do you want to move on while we work out the microphone for Robin?
Yeah. And so Robin was the last person to have their hand raised in the queue. And so this is the first call for anyone who is within this hearing that would like to comment. Please raise your hand now. And so, oh, we have a hand, Christopher Fay. And so, Victoria, if you can allow Christopher Fay to get the prompt to speak. Chris, please state your name and affiliation if applicable, before speaking.
Chris Fay, Town of Dartmouth. Just wanted to provide some additional comments. I echo the concerns as well as the points made by Chris Michaud, Mike Dalio, and also Sean McDonald from the Town of Dartmouth. You know, this is a process that is just deeply flawed. There's certainly been a widespread acknowledgement of the clean water issues that nitrogen has created, but the process in and of itself is a disqualifier for this entire process to frankly move forward and have these proposed regulations promulgate. You know, this new administration that's in place reportedly has a $987 million immediate needs bond bill on the table. $140 million in funding for housing, $250 million for innovative technology and manufacturing initiatives, and over $500 for infrastructure programs across the state. Haven't done a deep dive, but I'm not hearing anything about water quality. So if this is such a major issue that needs to be dealt with immediately, and the cost that immediately comes with a big asterisk because this is all driven by a lawsuit that DEP is responding to, then the state should put its money where its mouth is and come up with the funding necessary for this initiative. This initiative should have been started from a funding perspective 2+ decades ago, but DEP was asleep at the wheel on that. They should have worked with its partners to secure federal funding earmarks for an initiative like this. Furthermore, throughout this process, you know, DEP's deregulated these for-profit organic composting facilities. We've got a big issue in town. We've got folks in the northern part of town that have major waste and that they're downwind of that's just causing noxious odors. DEP has not responded to that. And these are major sources of nitrogen contributions in our water system. that and the New Bedford CSO. Hundreds of thousands of gallons, almost on a per storm basis, are put into our Buzzards Bay, and Padenham Harbor shuts down shellfish beds, and not enough is being done about that. So, a lot of layers to this issue. If DEP wants to take care of the Cape because that's an issue, then that should be something that's looked at separately. Completely different issue from what we see on the South Coast. And bring the money to the table. This should not happen without 100% funding on a state and federal match. This should not be put on individuals. It's an unfunded mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I believe, Robin, you figured out your mic issues, and so I would like to give Robin De La Fuente the floor to speak. Robin, once the prompts come up, please use them to unmute yourself and just state your name and affiliation before speaking.
I'm unmuted. I think it worked. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time. My apologies for the wasted time trying to figure that out. My name is Robin De La Fuente. I'm a Dartmouth homeowner. Relatively new to this, being the communication really didn't seem to have a whole lot of time to get to the residents of the town. I'm absolutely thrilled that we're now being made more aware of the problems. Environmental protection is a priority of my life, my household, but this doesn't feel like the answer. With the amount of information that I've been able to obtain from amazing community members, Nicole with Even Keel to start, several other members at the meetings, the data is simply not in place to support that the septic systems is the #1 problem for this issue. I'm all for locating the problem. We need more time to identify what that problem is and how we can better tackle it. I have an immense concern for this mandate that will financially ruin families of the town that cannot support this kind of effort. If in fact there is going to be state funding, fantastic. But to presume that that will just happen later is unfair and I think grossly negligent. I think someone made a comment of that earlier and it was really upsetting. Someone also pointed out, if in fact we are mandated to update our septics, that funds that we would normally be spending in our towns, the economics for our town would crumble. Our small businesses will now be affected. That money won't now go back into our community. Again, I'm all for finding an answer. This is a problem. It should not be ignored, but imposing this on the Dartmouth residents, on the very select 2,000 septics that are being pinpointed, simply doesn't seem like the answer. And I'm asking for more time for us to research, get the data, figure out how to make this correct and move through. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Robin. So it appears we've heard from everyone who desires to provide comments at this hearing. Before we close the hearing, is there anyone else who desires to provide comments? Let's see, we have two raised hands. And so we'll hear from Mark Yanni. Mark, once the prompts come up, please use them to unmute yourself. And please state your name and affiliation before starting to speak.
Hey, Mark, could you please unmute? Thank you.
You still have to unmute yourself, Mark. We can see your video, but you're still on mute. All right. While Mark is working out his mic, we do have another raised hand from MJ Mastrangelo. So if we can give MJ the floor to speak. MJ, please state your name and affiliation before starting your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to comment about the number of people who thought that this was an informational meeting and not just a public comment meeting. And it is clear from those comments that the informational meeting component of this project needs to be more robust. And I do hope that that DEP will take the comments that have been received, will redraft regulations, and that will go out to another public comment, but will also include in that process more public outreach for people to understand the implications of the regulations and how these regulations can impact individual homeowners and towns. So obviously more input on what the regulations mean is important. Thank you.
Thank you, MJ. So Mark, have you figured out your mic?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yep. If you could state your name and affiliation.
Thank you. My name is Mark Yanni. I'm a resident of Dartmouth. Like most people here, I am very aware of and concerned about the water pollution issues being addressed here today. It is, however, very unfortunate that the Mass DEP has nearly snuck through two inadequate and very capricious solutions determined by a totally arbitrary process. Posting a short notice on a government website about informational hearings to be held between Thanksgiving and Christmas, with a comment period ending shortly after, has caused a huge amount of distrust in this government entity. It took a lot of effort to extend this comment period. So while participating in these multiple events, I continue to hear the most important questions go unanswered and talked around. It has now come to light that environmental advocacy group members speaking tonight in favor of these DEP regulations are actually NSA committee members. This is an egregious conflict of interest. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Now we'll hear from Joanne O'Leary. Joanne, please use the prompts to unmute yourself. And before starting to speak, state your name and affiliation if applicable.
Joanne O'Leary, Westport resident. I've been listening to some of the DPU hearings, and yet I still think that it's very unclear whether the commercial, like local restaurants that are near the water get included, farmers who are fertilizing. We all love these things, but they're all part of the package of adding what it is that we'd like to clean up. And also, I haven't heard anything about whether it be a state beach or a local beach. I know some of the beaches just have the outhouses, but there are some bathhouses, and I'm just wondering where they are in the mix and what their responsibility is. And maybe they've already upgraded to these systems that you're referring to. But I just think as a homeowner that has this newer septic, it's less than 10 years old, quite an expense to me. And, I'm a senior. It's heartbreaking. And then also, I know in Westport, they had a small group meeting maybe about 3 years ago, looking into a private-public partnership. And I hadn't even been invited to the meeting, but yet, it was in my neighborhood and I just couldn't quite understand it, but trying to get my hands around this. But many of the homeowners, whether it be the Cape Cod or in the Westport, Dartmouth area, many of them are even seasonal. You also have individuals that are, snowbirds. So you just wonder how much of their actual waste is really contributing to the price tag that everybody's being asked to come up with. And personally, I just think it's outrageous an amount for individuals and put that responsibility to homeowners. And I will add a written comment later, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joanne. And so I'll just make one last call. If anyone would like to comment during this public hearing, please raise your hand now. All right. Eric has raised his hand. And so Victoria, if you can give Eric the floor. Eric, please use the prompts to unmute yourself and state your name and if you have an affiliation as well before starting to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Eric Mastretta. I own a family home in Eastham. Just to clarify, I know there's been some comments about a bill filed to help pay for this, but I think, that would require the rest of the state and their legislatures to get on board and pass that bill into law. And I think before these regulations are passed or this mandate is passed, then they should focus on that bill if that's the case. So people, have said that may be a way out of this situation, but I think we need to convince the rest of the state to get on board with paying for this and passing that bill before we finalize a mandate in the regulations. Also, as a practicing engineer, I'd just like to comment, everyone's aware with the supply chain shortages and labor shortages. So the 5-year homeowner mandate is really unrealistic. And I think it's good to have lofty goals to protect the environment. They need to be realistic and practical goals that can be achieved. And people have already commented on the effect on the real estate market. I think a lot of people would have to sell their homes to pay for this. And then you have seniors who really can't sell their homes because they're retired and have nowhere else to go. So just the impact on the real estate market, the logistics of getting these systems installed, given the supply chain shortages and the price gouging that could go on with some of the materials, precast concrete septic tanks, the innovative systems. I think all of these things need to be accounted for before imposing a mandate such as this. It seems like there's a tendency to want to figure it out after the fact, and it's just going to put a tough situation on boards of health who are going to be tasked with enforcing some of these mandates. How do we, grant waivers for people that have legitimately tried to upgrade their systems but couldn't because of the labor shortages? I mean, there's only so many contractors that are licensed installers on the Cape and on the South Coast, and so with the thousands of septic systems that will need to be upgraded, I think this has to be factored into when establishing an arbitrary 5-year time frame to make these upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I see Hilda has her hand raised. And so if Hilda can be given the floor to speak. Hilda, please, again, state your name and affiliation before starting to speak.
Yeah, my name is Hilda Menge. I'm also part of the Green Center. There's nothing wrong with our septic tanks Title V. What's wrong with it is that we put our human waste in it. We can keep our septic tank as it is and start diverting our human waste out of the waste stream. We save our nutrients, we save water, we save a ton of money, and we don't put as many gas house emissions into our atmosphere. It's just absolutely ridiculous that we make fertilizer one place and then throw it away in another place. That's what we're doing right now with all our nutrients. And it's unsustainable. Never any word about greenhouse gases, any idea of how much it takes to make a sewer. It's absolutely outrageous how we can ever even consider these items. Let's not put our human waste, which is not waste, it's nutrients that came from the plants we ate and the animals we ate, and let's not put it any longer into our waste stream. And then we solve all our problems. We don't have to have engineers. It's simple. We have lived with the composting toilet for 22 years. We don't put any of our human waste in the waste stream. It costs us $40 a year to run it for 2 families. And we have all our fertilizers. And we are still speaking about the same old flush toilet system, which is ruining our world everywhere in the whole world. We can no longer accept this. We have to start making a change if we want to see a change. And IA systems are not going to do it. Sewers are not going to do it. They are too expensive, too slow, and too energetically inconceivable to go on with. So please consider a real change. And all the people that want to go ahead with all these permits and the regulations, they have no good example. All of them flush their toilet waste into the environment. Nobody's doing the right thing for themselves. They always make other people do it with money. And I'm just so sick and tired of hearing the same old stuff, that there's no change. Just keep flushing the waste and keep paying for it. It is not going to work in the long run. We will not have a future for our kids. And I'm glad that I have time to talk. I believe in fixing this as soon as possible. I believe in regulations, but not this way. Please reconsider the alternatives that are true alternatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hilda, and thank all of you. I thank all of you who have provided comments, as well as those who have been in attendance throughout this public hearing. All the comments from this hearing and the written comments received by 5 p.m. on January 30th, 2023 will be considered before MassDEP finalizes the proposed draft regulations. And so comments can be still submitted through dep.talks@mass.gov. And so we look forward to more comments, and we will be going through all of them. And so there being no further testimony, this public hearing is now closed at 7:52 p.m. on January 25th, 2023. Please end the recording.